Welcome to the Pure Light Project podcast. My name is Andrea Mai, and today I have on Joe Garner, and we are going to deep dive into the subject of intuition. And before we get into that, uh, I just want to take a minute to say thank you so much, Joe. You had me on your beautiful show, Changing the Channel,
Yep.
a while back. And that was really fantastic, and so I'm really happy to kinda switch places here and dance with you again, and, so Joe, tell us a little bit about, Pure Light Project is really about humanity and shining our lights out into the world, and our spiritual journeys, our spiritual awakenings, and I'd love to hear a little, just maybe a little synopsis of how you came to be hosting your own podcast about the expansion of consciousness and your journey with that, if you wanna start there.
Yeah, I would love to kind of get into that. It's been a very interesting journey, as I think all journeys typically are. My spiritual journey started about 5 years ago with the intention of getting into meditation. I was running several different businesses at the time. I was a partner in several businesses. I was the CEO basically of a seven-figure business, and then I had some smaller businesses that were kind of just getting up off the ground. And in that space, I was just kind of wrecked with anxiety. The anxiety kind of led to depression, and in that space, I was just looking for something that would help me deal with the pain and the frustration and the anxiety and all of the stuff that had built up in my life. Not thinking that I could change anything. I just had to kind of find a way to deal with that, right?
Yeah.
So I got into meditation, and it was a hit or miss for me. I would spend maybe 2 or 3 weeks really delving into it and doing it every single day. And then I'd spend a month or two just completely ignoring it. And I did that on and off, probably for 2 years, until essentially the big breakthrough for me was COVID, as it was for a lot of people. COVID gave me that space, almost 4 months, where all the businesses were, for more or less, they were closed. I
Right.
was in event rentals, so anything you could than was between 100 and 200 people. So our business was closed more or less. Um, so that gave me the space to really focus on the meditation, and find that aspect of calmness and peace that it cultivates. So through the meditation, um, I was able to figure out how to tap into that calmness, and that changed the way when we came back on after that 4 month hiatus. It changed who I was and how I was showing up. Just every single day was different. It wasn't the same Joe that was showing up to work every day. It was this different Joe that was calm, that was cool, that kind of had almost like foresight about what was going to happen that day, especially when I was doing the meditations, and I was also kind of
Yeah.
walking in the mornings. I live near this beautiful kind of nature sanctuary, so I get to walk in that nature sanctuary often. So, um, and then I had what is typically called like a full Kundalini awakening. That happened almost a year after into COVID. It was the summer of 2021. And again, no intention. It wasn't like I was studying under a Kundalini specialist, or I was doing necessarily any spiritual um, practices that are designed to raise the Kundalini energy from the
Right.
root chakra up to the crown chakra. Um,
Right.
it just kind of happened. It like I went to bed one night and I was, that different person, but the next morning I woke up and I was like it felt like I was walking on clouds. It felt like everything was just falling into place like that. I don't really know exactly how to describe it. Um,
Yeah.
but I was in that space of essentially eternal peace. And from that space, I spent about 3 days in that mindset of everything is working out for me. Everything is happening exactly
Mhm.
as it needs to happen. I don't need to do or change anything. I just need to be this person. So that happened for about 3 days. And then, you kind of get out of that. You go back to the old person. Your brain goes back to the normal patterns that it's been designed and that have been ingrained into it after years and years and years. Um, but it was almost like a new North Star for me. Like I found a place that I could be moving towards. And that was now the focal point for me. So I had another busy season. And basically at the end of that season, I was able to really cultivate that sense of peace again, that connection to everything. Again, there's so many different words that you can use for that space that you're in, but
Yeah.
it was just pure peace. I felt like one with everything, and that everything was kind of falling into place. So that was kind of the awakening experience for me. Over the next year, I started I did some past life regressions. I really got into meditation, like um, with a very strong intention of what I wanted out of the meditations. I got into Mind Valley, so they use um, like the Six Sigma meditation. They use a lot
Mhm.
of powerful, like getting into the theta and gamma brain states to essentially change. Um, Joe Dispenza talks about it a lot, changing yourself from
Mm.
matter to energy. And that's kind of the idea behind those practices, is to change yourself more into energy than matter and allow uh, your frequency to basically attract things to you. Um,
Right, right. What sort of, when you began meditating, what was the sort of style of meditation that you were doing back then? Or were you experimenting with many, or
yeah,
what kind of
the first one I got into was it was Sam Harris's meditation. So basically, uh, it's a you're basically trying to notice the thing that is noticing you. So he has a very non-spiritual approach to mindfulness. Um, so essentially, you're looking for the conscious being that is experiencing your human experience. That's what
Sure.
he's looking for you to get to. But he's using non-spiritual, terms where essentially, I think his theory is that consciousness arises out of the physical, and that you're looking for that non-physical aspect
Mm,
that may or may not exist in his realm. Um,
okay.
so it was a little bit confusing, and basically you're just trying to like clear the thoughts out, allow them to pass, and then notice the thing that is observing. Right. So that's what kind of threw me for a loop. Then I got into transcendental meditation, and that was the game changer for me. Transcendental meditation essentially is you're recognizing that the thoughts are coming through, but detaching yourself from those thoughts and realizing that you are not the thoughts, you are the thing that's experiencing the thoughts. And that changed everything for me, because I was so wrapped up in the idea that I was my thoughts, and what I called myself, the ego,
Sure.
was
Sure.
only your thoughts. It was only what you were thinking at the time. And I finally got away from that, and it took me 34 years of my life to kind of get to that understanding that you're not your thoughts, and that you get to decide how you respond, or for most people, how you react to those thoughts. So, what the meditation does is it gives you that space between the thought and your response so that you can, you can tap into your heart basically and
Yeah.
say, okay, I had this thought. Why did it happen? Where does this come from? And how am I going to respond to this? Instead of what I would normally do was I'd have a thought and then I'd react to that thought, and then I'd, you know, usually have to suffer the consequences of that reaction to whatever that thought was.
Yeah, it's I think it's really interesting to notice when we are talking about meditation, all the many techniques and methods and styles, of meditation, because each one, you know, there is a similar, I believe, thread through most of it. Depending, it's like facets to working with the mind or the understanding of thoughts and the body and all of these things. I spent many years in two main forms. Uh, One was basically shamatha, which is calm abiding or peaceful abiding. And it's, again, right, just sitting there using the breath as your object of meditation. And very similarly, right, beginning to make friends with what's happening with the
Mhm.
experience, with meeting phenomena as it's arising, whether that's thoughts or, things in the room that you're noticing, and honoring that beautiful gap in between the in-breath and the out-breath. Uh, and it's such a spacious thing. We would work a lot of times with where our eyes were looking, like how far out were we looking?
Mhm.
Things like that, and then I did centering prayer for a long time, um, leading groups in that, and that was more sort of an esoteric Christian tradition. Sorry, I just realized I got a new phone, and I still don't know how to actually turn it off, so so
No
I'm trying to
worries.
uh, I went from iPhone to Android, whole new
Oh
world for
wow.
me, but
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a big change.
it is, but it's good. You gotta keep things moving, you gotta open. Um, yeah, that's really wonderful that you've gone through these many different, modes of meditation and seeing differences between them. Um, and so now today, what would you say is kind of your go-to mode or method, or maybe it's not necessarily a part of your regular practice. Maybe you've shifted to something else.
No, meditation is still definitely a part of my regular practice. So I wouldn't I guess I've kind of melded a couple different ones into what works for me. So I still do transcendental, typically 1 to 2 times a day. So just sitting with those thoughts, allowing them to pass. And then and this is what I teach as well, is that as I'm transitioning from one part of the day to the next, just taking that space, a couple breaths, closing the eyes, really feeling into, okay, what am I to be doing next? And just kind of allowing, again, this constant communication between you and your higher self or the universe or intuition, allowing that conversation to go on throughout the day so that you are, uh, again, yoga, the union of higher and lower self, so that you're in yoga throughout the whole day. You're in union with your higher self throughout the whole day. And a lot of yogis and meditators talk about, the goal of yoga is to be in yoga all day, every day, right? Not that there's really a goal in yoga or a goal in meditation, but um, you know,
From the perspective of what we might think of as the lower self,
right.
that part of us has goals. You know, the the higher aspect probably simply is.
Yeah, it's being. It has nothing to do
I
with
don't I
doing
don't
at
say
all.
maybe probably, it actually the higher aspect is, and it's
Right.
okay with is,
Exactly.
you know?
So that's kind of where I've developed and shifted and changed, and it's been less of a thing that I do and more of just who I am now.
Yeah.
And that is where it starts to become very powerful, where when you're just in that meditation throughout the day having these experiences. And don't get me wrong, there are I would say there's probably equal number of days where I am completely disconnected from my higher self, and I don't do the meditation, and I don't take time to find that space between one thing and the next to just calm and find that peace. But it's taking me far less time. So instead of me being in that space for 2 or 3 days, it's a couple of hours where I'm like, oh, I forgot. I got to meditate. I got to get back into that space, that frame of reference, that mindset. And I think I would love to say that it's an easy practice and that at some point you start to it just starts to happen, but it is every single day. I mean, you have to
Yeah.
cultivate that practice every single day if you're going to remain in the flow or in that state of connectedness with your higher self or your intuition or the universe or God or however you conceptualize the aspect of your multidimensional self that exists outside of time and space, outside of this time and space, at least.
Yeah. Yeah, I notice I'm writing a new book called The Calm Way, and starting to work on sort of some of the practices or exercise and really talking about it as a path of devotion to inner peace, inner and outer peace. And it's so fun, I think, because there's this playfulness that came in the last couple of years that was missing a lot of times from my old spiritual practices, you know?
Mm,
Um, and so it's this really cool thing of, man, we treat it almost like it's homework that we need to do, but what if we change the lens, right? What if we change it as this is this is like the best gift I can give myself today. Instead of all the busy doing, that few minutes, even like when you begin to work with it, right, on a consistent enough basis that you know what one good breath can bring you, one good just softening. Like you, I mean, it's not as regular. In part, it's just who and how I operate. There's never a moment of laying down awareness. There's choosing to operate in at different levels,
mhm.
but there's never not awareness, very complete awareness. And so what's interesting is I'm like, how do I get back to that sweet, peaceful place? Because I find myself now wanting much more of the cushion. For me, it really is like there's this sweet thing that happens on the cushion, you
Mm.
know, and I can be right here with you. Whew. I can hold that space. I can be that space. But man, it's just something. I don't know. Anyways, it's a thing. Like, how can I treat coming back to my cushion instead of as a task or a chore or even a practice as just like this great little gift, you
Right.
know? I don't know. That's what I'm working with these days.
Yeah,
Uh,
having that gratitude for what it is, being
oh,
grateful for that ability, because in years past, in my past life, I mean, there was no time for that. There was no time for me to sit down for 20 minutes in the middle of the day just to find my thoughts and find my center and make decisions from that space. At least that's what my mind said. That's what my human brain said. It was like, you don't have time for this. You got to do this, then this, then this, then this, then this. And looking back, it's like I actually didn't have time not to do that. If I had just spent that 20 minutes in that space of calmness, I would have
Sure.
realized that the 14 things that I needed to do that day, I could have knocked them down to 7. I could have done them in an hour, and I could have had the rest of the day to focus on what I really needed to be focusing on, which was all the other things that were going on throughout the day.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a catch 22 for me sometimes. The busier that you get, the more meditation that you need. I heard a great quote the other day. It was, you should meditate for 20 minutes unless you're busy. Then you should meditate for an hour. And it was like, wow, that's powerful, because
Yeah.
it's so antithetical to what your brain, what your like rational mind thinks. And that's, I think that's a fundamental law of living in the dual reality, in the dualistic reality, is that um, a lot of times there is, the answers to these great questions that we have are paradoxical. They have such a paradoxical feel to them that, the best way to get the most things done is to slow down. It just doesn't make sense. But in
Slow
yeah.
down to speed up has been my mantra for about 6 or 8 months now, right? Slow down to speed up.
Hmm.
And it's not like speeding up is a necessity. That's not it's got nothing to do with the old paradigm, with the paradigm we're laying down. It's more like almost slow down to reach what I fully am and what is possible, you know? So I love that, and that notion of you know, 20 minutes, or if you're busy, do it for an hour. Why are we busy? That beautiful question, why are we actually this busy? What are
Right.
we avoiding? What are we running to? What are we doubting about ourself? And so if it allows you to come back in and actually remember th the wholeness that we are, you know? But there's also, let's be like real honest here. There is no right or wrong. It's just, what do you actually want from life, and what distinctions do you want to make out of it?
Hmm.
You can avoid your wholeness as for the rest of this life if you choose. Just know it's a choice.
Right.
You
You
know?
get to make that decision. That's why we come here, have the free will to choose whether we invite that wholeness back into our lives, and we design our life that way. From my perspective, that your soul has designed your life. I literally designed my life to be completely absent of my wholeness for 33 years, almost exactly 33 years. And because I designed it that way, I now have this perspective of, okay, what is it like from a soul level to experience a lack of wholeness, a disconnection from, your true essence, to experience that for 33 years of your human life, and then all of a sudden, like a light switch coming on, just being absolutely connected to the truth that is, you are an essentially limitless being having this very limited experience on a physical plane of existence. And to experience that, I mean, my soul has learned such a profound lesson. And now the it feels like the lesson is, okay, share this with whoever is interested in learning about it. And
Yeah.
I think kind of the fun game that we get to play is, how do you show up in wholeness, in that true divinity of yourself, but not have it feel as if you're coming at it from a you're on your soapbox preaching about that divinity or that soul level awareness or whatever that is. um
Yeah.
I think that's the fun game that a lot of us are here to play, is how do we, because again, we're going through this transition in consciousness on the planet. We're going from essentially a species wide disconnection with their higher self and their soul, moving towards, in pretty much one lifetime, one iteration of this human species, towards that connection back to your higher self. And we're all going to experience that. So how how can you prepare people? How can you be there for people when they're going through this? um and again, not from a perspective of, I've done this, so this is the way that it needs to be. It's like, I'm here to give you space and to allow you to experience what you need to experience. But, here are a couple frames of reference or guideposts or signs that you might be able to follow. And that's kind of that's where a lot of us that have experienced it, that have gone through this, we're now, trying to figure out, okay, how do we take this information and just bring it back in the most loving and caring way, and not necessarily in a way that's like, you have to do it this way, this is the only way that you're able to achieve enlightenment, or this is the only gateway to heaven, is by following these very strict rules. Because I think once you've hit a certain level, you realize that none of that is necessarily true.
Yeah. So we started out saying that we were going to do a deep dive into intuition. And I would love to hear how it, so I'll put you like on the spot here. What's one way that intuition has shown up for you today?
Today, I had, um, well, it's today and yesterday. So yesterday, I was working at a coffee shop, and there was somebody at the other side of the table, kind of very deep into their work, and I ended up kind of moving down and sparking up a conversation with that person. And that person is actually working on their own essentially life coaching business, and they're in a
Okay.
position that I was about a year ago. And
Okay.
if I hadn't, there was something inside of me that said, go down and talk to that person, and that's what being in tune, in touch with your intuition allows and affords you to do. So ended up sparking up that conversation. Then we had a discovery call today, and we ended up booking, she's a client now of mine. So that's just one way that intuition kind of starts to show up, as you start to listen to it. And
Yeah.
I think what a lot of people sometimes miss is that your intuition is an intelligent being. Your intuition not only knows what you're thinking, but also knows what it's thinking and understands how it's guiding and showing you. So when you have a conscious recognition of your intuition saying, "Hey, go make that connection," or email this person, or have this phone call, they see whether or not you take action on that. So that your intuition, if you continue to just ignore it and ignore it and ignore it, it's like, the parent of a teen that just stops, that doesn't listen anymore. I mean, how often are you going to try to go into that teen and say, hey, you gotta stop what you're doing, you gotta go down this road, you gotta go down this road? And it's like, that's your higher self relationship with you. If you continue to ignore it, it stops showing up for you. It stops guiding you. It stops sharing with you. So, um, the more you can take action on that intuition, the more it starts to show up in your life every single day. And this is what we call synchronicities. This is what we call um, luck. A lot of people don't have that understanding of what they're dealing with, they just call it, hey, I got a lucky break today. I emailed the right person, and luck was on my side,
Right.
right? um,
Yeah.
but from the higher perspective, it's like, no, actually, you listened to the voice inside of you that is always, always, always guiding you towards your highest way of being, your highest timeline, the best person that you can be in this lifetime. And it rewards you. It rewards you over and over and over again. And a lot of people also like to put that um maybe responsibility on something outside of themselves. So they call it the universe, or they call it God, a God that's outside of themselves, which is okay for a certain level. But at some point, you have to realize that that thing that you're calling God is inside of you. It is the guiding voice that's inside of you. The
The still small voice, sometimes it's not so still or so small. It doesn't always require us to be quiet in order to
right.
hear it, and if it's not quiet, you really better
Whew.
listen,
Yeah. And the longer that you ignore it, and the more times that you ignore it, the louder that it becomes. This was a part of my journey, and eh, as my intuition, as my higher self was basically saying, hey, this is not the way. It went from a whisper to a knock at the door to a yell through the window, and then eventually, basically it broke the door down and punched me in the face and said, hey, this is not the way for you to go. And I finally figured it out. I finally caught that. And yeah, that was powerful.
Yeah, oops, I think we might have a did I drop you, Joe? Okay, well, I'll speak here to intuition. So it's interesting, hold on, and there you are.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you spoke all the way through and then it froze,
Yeah.
but
All good
y
though. It
yeah,
happens every once in a while.
yeah, that's what I do like about this system, it dials you back in pretty quick, so, um yeah, that loudness, what you're speaking of, right? So for years, I would offer, these little writing programs, and I love them. I love it so much getting people together and doing some creative work together, some creative play together, and this is when I left my job back in 2019, it was a big part of what my idea was. I was gonna write, I was gonna teach meditation, and I was gonna bring people together in these writing programs. So this has been 5 years, and, the last 2 years, it's been really interesting that people just have not gravitated towards it, and, like, it was always a very wonderful part of my life, so that's like, "Oh," and I was supposed to have a program this weekend called
Mm.
Intuitive Writing Magic, right? And so what's interesting is I've created a ton of material for this, and the universe is like we can feel, I think, often like we are literally in full alignment, and this is, I think, the next stage of intuition, at least in my life, is understanding that you can follow your intuition and it does not lead to a logical outcome. You think, I was guided wholly and fully to create this, and I was guided to reach out to this person, this person, this person, that platform. And yet it comes down and you know that you are not blocked. Like you really know.
Mhm.
that there are no energetic blocks. And so you're left with wondering, why did I create this? And so you can either stay stuck in, oh, poor me. Oh man, this happened again. Or you can be like, okay, I'm listening, right?
Right.
I'm listening. I'm looking, I'm observing. What's the next fun thing? Because this is too juicy and fun. Like there's something more in it. And so can you be patient enough to allow that, versus stop listening to your intuition, stop listening to your guidance because you didn't get the outcome that you assumed was going to be there. Are you willing to keep paying attention? And
Mhm.
so, anyways, that's where I am. And this has been showing up. This has been sort of a thing over the last year of, uh, and it's a person could get bogged down in the ego and be like, man, it didn't work.
Right.
It's an opportunity to move past that because there's this beautiful thing that happens. What we set out on this trajectory, but really, right? It's like actually over here. Like you meet that one person, you have that one conversation, that one seed that you planted or that was planted with you. And all of a sudden it flourishes into something so much more wonderful than you could have even imagined, that's my experience of it. So,
Yeah.
and it's
It's
not the old wishful thinking either, right? It's like literally the bloom just keeps unfolding. It's just,
Mhm.
you know, what about you though?
There's a couple, kind of Christian ideas behind that God doesn't give you what you want, he gives you what you need idea. So, your ego may have thought, "Hey, I want to be producing this. I want to be again doing what brings me joy." But what do you need right now for your soul to continue to develop and to blossom into what it's going to become?
Yeah,
Again, you're it's not that you're not going to, it's just what is the time frame when you're in linear time? Like, what's the time frame
yeah,
that you want to experience this? Do you want to learn through intuition, or do you want to learn through pain and suffering? Those are the two ways of learning. There's the Japanese have two terms for learning through intuition and learning through pain and suffering. They escape me right now. My Japanese is not very good, but
it's not ouch and wow.
yeah, exactly. It could be exactly.
I'm
Um,
cracking myself up.
no, that's a good. I might use that one. I think I'm gonna use that. That's a ouch
Ouch and
and
wow.
wow. Um,
Oh,
but yeah, it is. Again, I've had those experiences as well. I did a tune into your intuition for 2024, which was kind of a fun program. It's 6 weeks. It was under $200. I thought I would get at least 10 people to sign up for it, and um, I think two people were interested. One of them was the person who birthed me, and the other one ended up becoming a client of mine. But it was very interesting. Like, I knew when I was creating this and putting the effort into creating this system that this was going to be a success. But looking back, and this was right around the turn of the year, the new year,
yeah.
2024. Looking back, I was like, oh, this is why I did it, because I learned a new skill. I figured out a better way to use Google Forms, and I found a very easy way to essentially test pilot different programs. And I mean, it could take me no more than 20 minutes to come up with how to sign up and a sheet on how to sign up for something. It took me like 15 minutes to put together a um, social media ad and a pamphlet and a paper that I put around town. And, that was the lesson. The lesson wasn't that you were supposed to be doing this 6-week course on intuition in 2024. It was that you needed to learn some new skills. So I learned those new skills. I learned them because I was excited. My higher self
Yeah.
knew that I would be excited um, if I was working on this project. So it was like, okay, let's get him excited. Let's move him towards this goal, but let's make sure he understands that it was the skills that you learned, not the outcome of that particular endeavor. And that's a
Yeah.
tricky one for the ego to wrap its head around. That is a very tricky aspect for the ego to wrap its head around.
I love that. I so love that. You know, one of my favorite things that came out of, you know, this whole thing over the last month, and the intuitive writing magic, it's like it helped me. Like I had it's the prettiest landing page that I've ever made,
Mm,
like that my I got to take real satisfaction in designing it. And like being able to really clarify. I write much more clearly than I speak. And it allowed me to find um I'm building a store. I'm building the Pure Light bookshop, right?
mm,
And it's like it allowed me to come up with all this fun material that somebody, when I was sharing it the other day, they're like, "Oh man, that's so much fun." Like, I'm not a big merchandise person, right? Like, but like, yeah, put that on a mug, right? Put that on it gave me ideas that expanded things for the store. And it's not that the shop is about gluttony at all. It's like the opposite, but it's like, can we create things with the intention of really shining a light in places where there's not a lot, or shining light where it's just abundant,
mhm,
and bringing together a community of people. And what it did was help me tune into who is my community, you know?
mhm.
So all these wonderful things that came out of this program that will be something eventually, but not in the form that I originally imagined. And
Right.
there's something else you said, what you need now, right? I'm already actually extremely skillful in that area. And I recognize that this is a time of play and new explorations for me. So thank you, Joe, for really like I think you really nailed it right there. I don't
Oh,
need to I've shown over and over, just like you have, right? There's things we are skillful at. And we get to be supported and do new things too for
right.
our pure delight.
For your
Um,
expansion, yeah. I mean, that's
yeah.
that's the whole goal. That's the whole idea of coming into the physical realm, is that you start out as this tiny little seed and you continue to grow and grow and grow as a person, bigger and bigger, and not necessarily like as a physical scale, but on the mental, emotional, and spiritual scale, you're always growing. You're always transitioning. You're always moving into a new perspective or a higher perspective. And, the road to that it's not a straight line. I mean, that's very abundantly clear. If you're not aware of that, then um, I, I would love to know what programs you're working with. But um, yeah, it's not necessarily a straight line, but there is always growth, always. And even though it doesn't look like it, like when the caterpillar is going into the cocoon, that doesn't probably feel like growth. You're enclosing yourself in this tiny little space and then liquefying yourself to become. You probably don't even know what you're becoming. So even in those times of when the ego says I'm being contracted, or this isn't going my way, or this isn't how I think it should be going, it's just setting you up for that period of growth, that you as a um as a being in linear time and space can't see far enough ahead to know that it is coming. And this is I think a big key for growth, is to understand, even though it feels like you're stuck, even though it feels like you're going backwards, even though it feels like everything is falling down around you. And again, this is true both in the personal and in the collective, because this is what is happening in the collective as well. Like
True.
in the collective, we're going through this period of what feels like contraction and pain and suffering, and everything in the world is falling apart. All, we're going to war in all these different places. Like everything seems to be falling apart. But what we can't see is that golden era that is just on the other side of this precipice. The Most humans can't see that perspective. They're not at a high enough level to be able to see what is coming, what is truly on the way. And this is where the artists, who are the way seers, who are the ones that see into the future, they're the ones that are, they're writing the stories, they're building the books, they're making the art. You go on Netflix, I mean, there's so many powerful shows that are literally showing us what the future of humanity looks like. I'm watching a show called Beat Bop, something Cowboy Beat Bop, and it's basically about.
Somebody just a friend of mine just sent me a video that's really Bebop Cowboy,
Yeah.
I told him yesterday I've fallen in love recently with Japanese jazz from the '70s, and he's like,
Oh,
"Oh, the
you're gonna love this
Japanese know how
show.
to jam." And he said literally, like, last night he sent me that. That's
Yeah.
funny.
And I mean, it's about these two guys who are essentially cowboys. They are going after criminals who have warrants, and they're trying to find them. But it's basically after the earth ended. They talk about the old earth and all of this stuff. And it's like, yeah, I mean, the artists, the creatives know what is coming. So listen, tune in, figure out, like, okay,
Yeah,
plan and prepare for this, because this is the future. This is what is going on. Like humanity is waking up to our ability, all of our abilities, not only spiritual abilities, mental and emotional abilities, but even our physical abilities.
yeah,
As the consciousness raises on the planet, so too do the genes of the humans. So we start to have telepathic abilities. We start to tune into the subtle energies that exist all around us, that our
yeah,
ego, that our thinking mind, that the logical mind shuts out. And this is what, I'm trying to help people understand and help people go through that process, when the belief of their world, of what it used to be, which was that, you didn't have any access to anything. Some people call it magical, some people call it spiritual. It's just, if you want to look at it from a quantum mechanical perspective, it's literally just outside of the spectrum that the human body is physically able to interpret. So
yeah,
outside of the visible light spectrum, outside of the audible sound spectrum, outside of, again, your nerves are only able to pick up a certain level of touch and feeling. Um, there's trillions of particles traveling through your body every single second that you're alive, but you don't feel them, you don't experience them. So humans are starting to fully understand that we're able to experience those, and we're able to tune into those energies. I was having a discussion with a friend a couple weeks ago, and she was saying, how are you're teaching people how to tune into their intuition? How are you preparing them to use magic? And I had to think about that. Like I was off the phone with her, and just that kind of ruminating on this question, like, how am I teaching people how to tune in or use magic and use it responsibly? And to be honest, it's not magic anymore. The idea that
nice.
it is magic is only from the perspective of the limited human being. We're all moving away from that limited human beingness. So this isn't magic. This is just this is just using your birthright, your, what you've always been able to use, but you're now conscious of it. And that is what I teach people, how to tune into, how to tap into that ability, whether it's their intuition, or they have the frame of reference that it's channeling, or they want to do, I do past life regressions. So I get people into a meditative state, and then basically help them experience, past lives. What have they experienced from a soul level before this that led up to their human perspective, and usually that opens up, that turns on a light bulb in their head of, oh, this is why I'm here, this is why I had that experience as a child, and my parents were this way, and I've um, gone down this road of basically, whatever their life's path was, and it hits that light bulb on. So again, these are all just, a lot of people like to say that it's magic, or it's spiritual, or that it's all that, and I'm saying that this is more in line with what humanity is going to be like in the next 10 to 15 years. So if you want to jump on it, if you want to adopt, it's like the early adoption of the internet. Like the conscious revolution is almost like the internet was in the 70s and 80s. Like very few people knew about it back in the 70s and 80s. And then there were the early adopters in the 90s and early 2000s, and that just set those people up for so much success and so much ability to benefit from this new technology. And this is where we're at. Instead of it being an external technology, it's an internal technology.
Yeah, the notion that, we are the technology is really key to my life, you know, and it's a thing that once you get the more you open and open and open to it, right? The idea of our intuitive ability or our psychic ability, our ability to heal ourselves through
Hmm.
our mind. Yeah, I mean, we work from an outside perspective through most of my life. You work from the outside in instead of the inside out, and now that is shifted over the last, especially probably the last 20 or 30 years. More and more people understanding that we can work from the inside to the perceived outside.
Right.
It's we heal ourselves primarily, you know. Um,
I would even remove the word
once
primarily. Like, we
well,
heal
I mean,
ourselves.
we do heal ourselves. I will say, like, I've seen and heard people's, you know, stories of even broken limbs, you know, uh, like, we have the ability to knit that back together. Sometimes our tolerance for pain or our tolerance for, that gets in the way of something that could be even instantaneous is but certainly within a very short window if it's our time to accept it, you
Right.
know? And this is the thing, that's, to be responsible for this conversation is to understand that we each can accept these things or not on a conscious or subconscious level, and it is our choosing. And you cannot thrust it on anyone, you know, like
Right.
when they're not ready for it or they're not interested in it, even small things. Um, that's been coming back to me a lot lately. Like what you think is just a helpful tip, is really like you might be getting met more and more with mind your own business,
Hmm.
right? Um, And that is okay. And that's where compassion, when we can just sit and we'll just open up and allow each of us to like dance in our own dance. Uh, it's gonna all shake out. Like, my body wants to do this, it wants to all shake out just as it should. And your soul and your whether you call it a soul or your highest self or aspect or whatever, um, it is so beautiful to it came up yesterday and it was kind of funny, right? The slang, like the phrase we say, "You do you and I'll do me."
Mhm.
And, like, that is actually the sovereignty and the compassion is allowing each other to do that. But man, if you are in the space of wanting to get on that train, like you're saying, Joe, right? Get on this train of consciousness, of expansion, uh there is so much available now and so many wonderful things, so many wonderful beings. You, me,
You, yeah.
we're doing what we're playing our game. We're
Right.
playing it, and I love that. I love that, and I'm so tickled to see you, uh, really jumping in this, like, just the last few years, last half a decade or something, maybe a
Not
decade?
even. Yeah,
Not
it's
even,
been
I mean,
it
not even,
I would
right?
say 3 years at the most is
Yeah,
been my journey.
yeah, and what that's done for your life is just so, like, spectacular. It's honestly spectacular to watch, and to hear about, so I'm really glad you're here sharing about it,
Mm.
like, really glad. So if people are interested in exploring their intuition and their questions with you, what's a way for them to do that?
Yeah, the best way, is to go to either my website, which is joegarner.net, or my Instagram, which is Garnation. So it's GAR Nation on Instagram. And I've got links to all my social medias, all the programs that I offer. On my website is just the best way to get a hold of me to set up a time to talk. I do a 30-minute discovery call just to see if it's a good fit, see where you're at as
Mhm.
a person, and see if I have, what you're looking for, or if I can recommend somebody like Andrea or many of the other coaches and spiritual guides that I've been able to connect with. If maybe one of them is a better match. So I love talking to people. I love getting people's perspectives. So feel free to reach out and let's have a conversation.
Beautiful. And if you have a desire for listening to other great conversations, check out his podcast, Changing the Channel. It's
Yeah.
uh, how long have you been doing that now?
I started that back in September was I think the first 2 or 3 episodes that, or no, August. The end of August, I put out the first couple
Nice,
episodes. So I am up to, I think today was my 42nd episode out. So
nice.
I was all in on the podcast, and there's a
You're
whole bunch of really fun conversations. I like to keep the guests from all different backgrounds. So I love having people like futurists, people in business, people in AI. Obviously, I have a lot of spiritual people on the podcast as well, but there's a very interesting intersection between the business world and the spiritual world right now that's happening, and it's really fascinating to kind of watch that and also be a part of it, because that's a lot of the forward facing, I guess, programs that I have are geared a little bit more towards the business world, because that's where I come from. I spent
yeah,
13 years running and owning businesses. So there's a reason
yeah,
that happened, that's in my path of life. So obviously, I'm going to gear it towards businesses and kind of figure out how can I walk that fine line between the very rigid physical aspect of what a business is, while also incorporating a little bit of consciousness into that business. So just being a little
That's
bit more self-aware, being aware that there is this thing called conscious capitalism and that there's a huge movement behind it. So you know, we're approaching all aspects of society are getting uh, introduced to the idea of what consciousness is and how it can play a bigger role as we move forward as a society, as a global united society.
yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's the dreamer in me. I've been holding this vision for a very long time, and
Right.
it's so good. I'm part of a group, we're not a mastermind, we're called Master Hearts, right? And
Ah,
it's
I love
really
that.
like the conversation I was part of a lot of networking groups for the first few years that I was self-employed, and, ooh, like, what we're doing is in some ways it looks similar, and in other ways it's so heart centered and so beyond, like, what I've experienced in other groups, and
Mm,
so I'm really seeing that that kind of thing will grow more and more, where people can really help lift each other up, support each other, but drop the old, like, super, dominating, rah, rah, like really coming in for those who want it. Like, if it's not out there and you want it, create it. There
mhm.
are people who are ready to play with you. Invite a few friends and create something where you can support each other, even if you don't know each other that well, right? It's a fascinating experiment, um, to go through. So, anyways, I don't know why that came up, but it did, and so we'll
No, I love
it's
that.
it's
Yeah,
really cool.
that's power. I love
Well,
the master heart. It's not a mastermind.
yeah, and then there's a distinct difference in other experiences I've had, so,
Mm.
um, but yeah. Well, I just wanna thank you, Joe, for being with me today. Really, really appreciate you and all you're doing, and, eh, I think that 2024, I don't know about you, for me, it's literally I've known for a long time it's gonna be the best year, ever.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
that's exactly what it feels like for me as well. All the energy, you know, anybody who has been in this conscious state for the last couple of years, this is the year where everything starts to kind of shift and change for them. Um,
yeah,
uh, all the astrology, everything that's out there is basically saying 2024. This is the year of creation, of abundance, of new ways of doing things. So this is where we're at. And yeah, I love that you said if it doesn't exist, create it, because that's what we're here to do. We're creative
yeah,
beings. So get out there and create it, build it, and they will
yeah,
come.
yeah, exactly, and if you find yourself shy or uncertain or afraid to do that, reach out to me. It's one of the things I work with people on is helping you find your trust in yourself, finding
Mm.
your voice to speak, to write, to express. Um, yeah. Well, I guess we should probably wrap this up. We've been
Yeah,
at
this
it a minute, so
it's a wonderful conversation. I loved every minute of it. So
Oh,
thank you.
all right. Well, take care and keep shining, my friend. Keep shining.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.